What is going on, everybody? My name is Jordan, aka King Friday. That's my last name. I am so excited to be here with you all today. So this is episode 3 of the TMP crossover podcast. This is where we have industry leaders and the best minds in pro audio that are going to be able to come together and talk about some of the cool things that are happening in the industry. So today we have some amazing guests today. We're basically going to be talking about everything with the Avid S6L platform. It's the live platform that they use over there, and it's amazing. And we've got the best people to be able to talk about that on today. So first off, let me just introduce my guests. So I've got Matthew Lawrence here, and he is the National Sales Manager over there at Avid. So say hello.
Hello.
Perfect. Awesome.
Hello.
Great. Awesome. And we also have Chris, and I want to make sure I say this right, Chris Marchessault, and he is a sales manager over at TMP. The music people, say hello.
Hey, how you doing? You did a good job. Most people butcher it.
Awesome. It's not like I didn't have some coaching beforehand. So we're gonna jump right into it. So the great part about the S6L platform from Avid is that it allows you to be able to say it doesn't matter what type of venue you're in. If you're in a really small venue or if you're in a massive stadium, you can use the S6L platform because it scales that you can choose the specific parts to be able to add to a specific build that you would put in whatever venue you happen to be in. So we're actually going to talk about that right now. So I'm not the expert. We're going to pivot to the experts. I think it's going to be awesome. So let's just get going. So Matthew, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk a little bit about where live sound is now and where it's going. I feel like live sound isn't just for the in-person audience anymore. I think that it is a lot people demand a lot more from live sound other than just the concert itself for the in-person audience. Tell me a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing and some of the ways that people are using the board in more than just sound reinforcement. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's I think it's a good question, by the way. But the what I'm seeing is, you're right. I think that 2020. We won't mention what happened, but in 2020, there was a lot of how do we still get live shows without being at the concert, right? And so the idea of whether you are at an install or you are at a live concert or you are wherever. I mean, I remember Garth Brooks did something to the effect of half in, half out once people started meeting up, right? It was like, there's a show inside, but there's also a show in the parking lot. And then it kind of went into, there's a show inside, but make sure you can see it online. But before, I think there was an afterthought. It was more, if you want to see this, you can see this online. It might be, the audio quality might be just a left and right. It might just be, something that people are trying to put together. And as the time is, after 2020, we've had a few years now where the level of audio that is expected after the concert or even during the concert is much higher than it used to be. And so having those tools, having the quality of tools that you're going to be able to reproduce that is important, right? So when you talk about what we're here to talk about today, which is the S6L, the idea that the quality of what you're working with, those tools are to be able to produce the best possible thing you can put, not only in the concert like we're talking about, but also, like you said, online.
Absolutely. And I think a lot more, it used to be, it's like the concert, like if you didn't go to, Resurrection Fest or something like that, if you didn't go, you didn't go. That used to be the way it was. It's like, but now, and then here's the other thing is that if the concert audio wasn't that great, it's like, I mean, that affected that one audience at that one time. Now, it doesn't mean that front of house engineers don't want the best audio possible, but it's like at that point it's like, well, if it's not, for time in memoriam, this concert, the way this concert went, is going to be preserved for all future generations. That's not, I mean, that is the case now in a lot of ways. I mean, just look at Taylor Swift's with her Eras tour. It's like that's selling out theaters, just as much as it's selling out the actual concert itself. So
sure.
and
Sure.
yeah, so I think it's very different than it used to be.
Yeah, and you know what? I was going to also mention you're starting to see there's the online experience, but then there's also like the hybrid, which is what I'm seeing, which is what Metallica does. So I went and saw Metallica has 5 S6Ls, right?
Nice. Wow.
And one of their S6Ls is doing all the recording aspect of things. And what's interesting is that you can, once you see the show, you can't see it online right away, meaning you can't go, oh, I want to watch the Arizona show while the Arizona show is playing. What you can do is take a QR code and say, I want to buy the album of this show that I was at.
Oh,
right. So then there is the I was at XYZ show.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that I can listen to that show. I remember when, Lars did this, or I remember when, James did this. Oh, and you listen back and you're like, that was it. That was that time. So now you're getting the idea of I was at the show. I want a memory stamp of that show. And so in the same way, yes, I think having an online experience, yes, having it pushed out to a streaming site, but then there's also I want the canned experience of what I was able to experience live for eternity.
Yeah.
So again, in the same way, you're wanting to make sure that you have the right tools to be able to capture that in the right way.
That's incredible. Yeah. I think with all of those, and I do, I actually remember I went to a Infamous String Dusters concert and they did that. I didn't know what was happening. They were handing me something and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but they were like, yeah, this concert is preserved and you can just download it. It came with the ticket. You can go and download it. And I was like, wow, that's, and like you said, for those moments that happen in live concerts, that they always do, but those specific moments, or like with a bit of improvisation or, just something that they said or whatever it happens to be, it's like, you're never going to get those back. But the fact that those audience members were there and to be able to enjoy those again and again. And to me, the more that you can say no cell phone, like you don't need the cell phone to have that specific moment captured in time. Please. Yes. The more you can do to do that, to get rid of cell phones in concerts, the better. And it seems like Avid is killing it with that. Chris, I'd like to move over to you. So, we talked a little bit about the way that concerts are changing. Festivals are now more popular than ever. Where it used to be, I'm sort of calling, I'm sure somebody else calls it this too, but sort of the Woodstock effect where, there are specific festivals that pull through that just have a massive amount of bands from the largest names that are in the biggest font all the way down to people that you may still know, but all the way down at the bottom. It's like those are the shows that a lot of people are spending a lot of money to see. I live in Sacramento. Aftershock comes through every year. I would love to get a little bit of your insight as to, because you probably talk to these types of organizations a lot, is what are they hoping that they can get when Aftershock or somebody like that comes to you? What are they hoping to achieve with their live sound reinforcements for touring specifically?
Well, I think again, going back to what 2020 did to the world, just having multiple media outlets and multiple ways to get the content to the consumers, the people who are going to be absorbing that material. And I think it's really cool what Matt was just saying about the Metallica concert. I didn't even know that. That's a really cool, unique thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really like the main thing is just being able to push that content out in as many ways as possible, and to have like an ecosystem like the S6L where you can have a huge, top bands, A-listers, and then these smaller, maybe even kind of local guys, and if you have a S6L platform, you can have various sizes and we're going to obviously get more into that. But you can have various deployments of equipment that'll all speak to each other. I think that's one thing that people like these days and look for in these big festivals, is that everything can kind of interact with each other.
Absolutely.
I think that's definitely one aim or goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would tend to agree that, and you know, a lot of times it's like the supporting acts, you know, in certain situations, the supporting acts have to be on the exact same front of house console as the, you know, as the main talent, you know, depending on the size of the festival. But then other times it's like, yeah, you know, headliners have their whole other rig and stuff like that, and the openers have their rig, you know. But it's just having a certain amount of versatility and flexibility, I think. And the fact that, and like you said, we are definitely going to get into it. I'm chomping at the bit too, but the fact that the Avid, you know, the S6L system allows you to be able to not necessarily, maybe not for everything, but not necessarily have to split out front of house for your headliner versus your opener, because of the amount of flexibility and versatility that it has.
So what is interesting is that the idea of, you're talking about festivals and how, you know, for the main acts, the openers and stuff like that, the idea that they have to maybe be on the same console. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that you were mentioning how everything, parts and pieces, no matter how big, no matter how small. One of the unique things is that the Venue platform is that a lot of these guys who might be a smaller band who haven't got up to the S6L yet, haven't gotten into the bigger, more expensive desks, they still have files that are profiles, SC48s. The legacy idea of all of the Avid or DigiDesign, right, all the way back to 2008, any of those files can go onto the S6L, not just any S6L, or not just a specific S6L, any of the S6Ls. So I'm an engineer. I had a file for this band and it was on a profile. Now I'm going to a festival. I'm flying over anywhere in the world, and now I need to be able to make sure that that file works for the band that I'm on. Well, we don't have a profile, but we have an S6L. That same file can go into any of the S6Ls, which is unique in its platform. No other console company can do that. So if you're talking about festivals and making it easy, or making it as simplistic with the most return on investment for a production company or for somebody who's looking for this desk, the idea that you can take your investment into an S6L and acquire almost anybody to work on it, from the opener to the headliner, that's something that is unique and provides the most return on investment for somebody looking to get into this product.
So I think the last thing that we should really talk about is the fact that overseas tours are now, to me, are a lot more accessible to even smaller acts than it used to be. It's like, unless you were Metallica, there was no way that you were going to be able to go and do an overseas tour with any degree of sort of professionalism and consistency across everything. It's just sort of, it's like, whatever they have is whatever they have. But I think there's a lot more, especially with the S6L platform. There's a lot of opportunity to be able to say that it's like, hey, if we invest in this platform now, especially if it was if it's a record label that's going to say, hey, we're going to do a tour with, you know, our top 5 artists, and they're going to do a Europe tour, but they're actually all based in the US. And it's like, and be able to say, we're already invested in the S6L platform. We have, you know, the specific control surface that will allow us to be able to take that on the road. It'll be safe, but we'll have consistency from show to show. I think that's something that's really, you know, that's really important, but they need the smallest amount of gear to be able to have the biggest, to be able to put on the biggest show, because as everybody knows, it's like, the more gear that you spend, you know, the more gear that you bring costs a lot more. I actually just recently found this out myself when I had to leave a bunch of lighting equipment because they wanted to charge me thousands of dollars to bring it back because there was a snafu. So I'm the first one to say that it's like the least amount of gear for the biggest outcome is the best thing. So I really want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of this system. So I'm gonna turn it over to you guys, and I'm just gonna run through these slides, and I would love for you guys to sort of take the audience through exactly, you know, sort of a use case of each one of these. But yeah, so I'm just gonna let's do that. So here we go. So let's talk about the 3 main parts of any S6L platform. It's going to be your board, your engine, and your I/O. So the board, Matthew, what is the board in this in the system?
Well, you got the surface, and the surface is what, I don't know if we could see, but it's what's in front of me. But the idea of what you have control, it is the control of the system.
Yeah, I would absolutely. And there are different sizes of this, so it doesn't, like for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with digital consoles, where it's, you're more in the analog world. On an analog console, it's, if you have a 64 channel analog console, you need 64 faders for an analog console, because each one needs its own, it needs its own line. But with a digital one, you could control as many channels as you have I/O for on the smallest control surface, because it's just pointing all of your, each of the faders is just pointing to a specific channel digitally. So in this case, we have several options, for those specific control surfaces. So the 16 channel allows you to be able to also bank through as many, like I said, as many banks as are, within your system.
Yeah, so on that specific system, or on any of these systems, depending on the engine. So on the engine, if it's a 192, you can actually mix 192 channels by 96 outputs on that 16C. So not saying that's what you would want to do, because that is a lot of banks, that is a lot of different layers, but you could, right? So in that same preference of, I'm on tour, I'm doing a fly date, I have now a 16C. And so the idea where you can still mix your monster show from a stadium, and then go to somewhere in the world and mix it on the 16C. So you are correct, Jordan. That is exactly what you can do.
Yeah, and it's great too, because it's some people might say it's like, but I want to see like a certain amount of channels on at all times. It's like, okay, so the Avid has thought about that and has given multiple different levels of control surface in the amount of complexity, the amount of channels. So obviously the 16C has 16. As we move on to the 24 has 24, and we're starting to see some panels pop up that allow you to be able to have further control, where you can actually start controlling plugins and being able to make visual adjustments that aren't just on the channel strip itself. As you can see with the 24D, that, like I said, that gives you even more control. As we move on to the 32D, now we've moved from 3 to 4 screens. Go ahead.
And D is for display, and C is for compact.
Right.
So as we're looking at that is once you start getting to the Ds, you're seeing the display pop up. And so yes, the more parameters, more stuff, but you have your C is for compact, and that's more along your value engineered type of things. In this situation might be for a house desk, where you're going to have multiple bands come in with their own desk, and maybe your house desk is the 24C, and then you start getting into the Ds when you're starting to get into, these are the bands that are carrying their own desks, and or it's production companies that want to fulfill writers. That's where the Ds start coming in. Yeah, absolutely.
And on those Cs, you can still add an additional display on both of those Cs, correct, Matt?
You can add additional display, as in everyone has to have a external screen.
Yeah,
but as far as
correct.
Everyone has an external screen. That's correct.
But the difference between having an external screen and then also having the additional screens that are built directly into the unit in this case.
You got it. That's exactly right.
Perfect. So yeah, the 24D, move on to the 32D, like you were saying, specifically with display, quite a few displays on that one. And then the 48D, which is absolutely a monster, but perfect for the largest possible productions and venues and stuff. I would imagine, and Chris and Matt, feel free to chime in here. I'm curious, where do you see the 48D really popping up? I would imagine it would be like theater or orchestra or something like that.
I was going to say theater probably, and anything with massive just amounts of channels, and someone who needs to really have everything splayed out right in front of them at all times. I sell a lot more of the 24s and the 32s myself. I don't think I've sold a 48 yet, but Matt might be able to add some other use cases for the 48.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you got Kenny Chesney, Tom Petty when he was around. There's a 48D where, you have everything in front of you. And that also, there's been a couple universities and some house of worships that do it as well. And the interesting part about the house of worship part is that even though we talk about this whole layer aspect of things where there's multiple layers and you can put everything down there, it makes sense if you've been on a digital console. There's a lot of people that are still moving from those old analog desks where they need everything in front of them. And so what's interesting is the 48D with 48 faders, you can have 48 faders right in front of you, right? And so there is that almost that I don't want to let go of my security blanket and say, I need all my faders, or I need all my channels on every single fader, and I need it in front of me. Well, the 48D is that. So I've seen the use case of I need it all in front of me, whether that be install or whether that be touring.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Touring, I would still imagine. It's like, unless you've got those massive semi trucks that you're willing to move that thing around, I guess.
We're not talking about, buses and trailers with a 48D. That's definitely not happening.
No. Big, you need something larger for sure. So as we move into the heart of every S6L system is the E6L engine. So every system has to have an engine. And there are varying degrees. They all kind of look the same in the way of the box for the most part, with a couple of minor differences. So some people might not know exactly what the differences are. So let me throw it up. Chris, Matt, tell everybody what the engine specifically does and sort of where it sort of fits within the whole system.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about the engines here. So there's three main models, and just like you said, Jordan, they all identically look the same from the front. The main difference here is going to be your input count. So you have the 112, which is 112 inputs, 144, 144 inputs, and the 192, which is obviously 192 inputs. With that, you get different amounts of buses. On the 112, you have 48. On the 144, you have 64. And on the 192, you have 96. Those are the main differences. You get 400 plug-in slots for all three, which is a really cool update. And Matt, if you can go about the power supplies difference on the three.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yeah, no, that was a great explanation. So the 112 has internal redundant power supplies to more of a valued engineered sort of situation, and the 144 and the 192 have hot swappable power supplies.
Great.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of people are really going to want to look and sort of want to future-proof their system. That some people might say that it's, maybe I don't need to necessarily get the smallest one, but I personally think it makes sense to potentially get maybe more than what you need in this case. It's obviously Avid has given everybody sort of an opportunity to be able to say, well, if you only need the 112 for the input counts, it's like that's fine. But really look at the buses too. I don't know. For those of you that are in live sound, it's like, for me specifically, I'm more in the recording studio. It's like I'm bussing everything. So and then especially if you're trying to do multiple bands, or if you're in theater and things like that, that bus increase is very important to see. So I think this is the part where a lot of people are going to probably want to invest a little bit more in a higher caliber engine in certain situations.
Future proofing.
Couldn't agree more. Yep. Yep.
Definitely.
Couldn't agree more.
And then the last part, we're finally here, is the I/O. So this is what you're actually going to be plugging in all of your sources into. And it gets a little bit sort of just like, a bunch of numbers. So we'll slow it down just a little bit here. But the local 16 is a little bit different than the stage boxes here. So Matt, Chris, can you explain a little bit about why you would purchase the local 16 potentially on any system that you decide?
Yeah, sure. I'll take this one. So the local 16 doesn't live inside of the AVB ring. So the AVB ring is what's connected, right? It's the umbilical cord between all these sources. And so the local 16 is, if you want, on the surface, it has ins and outs, has 8 analog in, 8 analog out, and 8 AES. If you need more than that for whatever you have going on, you would add the local 16 to your system. So front of house system, monitor system. If you wanted to live in the ring, meaning you wanted to share IO, then you get something like a stage 16, which I believe is the next slide.
That's
so
exactly
the local
right.
16 is, yes, the local 16 is for the system that you're looking at, or the system that you want more IO at the system that you're at, right? So
at that
stage
front of house
16
position, you mean?
Sure. And so the stage 16 is 16 in, 8 out, right? And so that is a fixed IO box where you can have, for instance, I know some guys will put it, instead of using a subsnake, they'll use this as their drum IO. So they'll put it on the drum riser and use the inputs that you see right there for their drum. Right. So instead of going, well, I'm going to take all this and then run it into an analog subsnake and then run an analog subsnake over here, it's just 2 Cat5 cables and you're off and running. So I've seen that as a use case for the stage 16.
And I'd like to actually mention one thing about the IO is that you can expand. I don't know, and Matt, maybe you know. I'm sure you know this. I don't believe that there's any limit to the amount of stage. Like, so if you wanted to do all stage 16s for some reason, as long as your engine supports the amount of inputs, there you could have as many of each each of these IO boxes as you want, whatever type of configuration you want. If you just want 164, or if you want several stage 16s, that's possible, correct?
So there is a limitation, and we won't get into it. So there is limitations to it, just meaning, there is 192 based on the engine, or 144, right? And the respective outputs, right? And then there's also the amount of devices you can have living on the AVB ring. But this is a perfect example of why we're here, right? So I'm with Avid, Chris is with TMP. So if you have a question, you reach out to TMP and say, hey, I saw this podcast and I'm looking for what is connected, right? And Chris can go, well, actually, it's these things. And Chris knows all this stuff, right? Chris has plenty of information and handbooks and stuff like that to be able to go through. And there is, right? I mean, for instance, we'll just go, the bare minimum is you can have 3 stage 64s. Do you know why you can have 3 stage 64s? Because it totals 192 inputs and 96 outputs. Right. So each stage 64 is 64 by 32. So anyways,
but that's specifically what I was talking about.
There is limitations.
Right. Yeah. But the limitations are based around the engine. Right?
Yes, but it's also the amount of devices that can live inside of the AVB ring. So there's more to it. I wish you can just throw everything on it and it is what it is. But that's not the case. So yes, the idea of you can get a stage 64, and I think where you're going, Jordan, is if you get a stage 64 and you're like, ooh, man, I need more IO, you can add more IO, which is great, right? So is it unlimited? The short answer is no. Is it the fact that you can start somewhere and if you need more, you can get more? The answer is yes.
That's great.
So that's cool.
Moving on, so the stage 32. So in our previous discussion, it sounded like this one's a little bit different. Can you tell them about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go for it here. So the stage 32 is interesting because it's all removable, right? So you can get a blank one and you can put anything in there. So for instance, you can have 32 in, you can have 32 out, or you can have anything in between. So what you're looking at now is 24 in and 8 out. So you can have anything you want. So if you have the system where it's, you have a stage 64, which we'll get into in a minute, or maybe you had a few stage 16s and you want to add a stage 32. So having this as removable IO to choose whatever you want to add to your system makes it, as you said, kind of a Swiss Army knife, right? So you can put anything you want to add to your system when it comes to IO. And I've seen that done quite a bit where people have ordered a system and they're like, well, I need more X amount. I need more, maybe they did order the 192 engine, right? And that has 96 outs. Well, they ordered a stage 64, which is 32 outs. Okay, let me get maybe a couple stage 32s, or maybe get one more stage 32 with all outs, right? So that idea where you can, that is the typical, I want to add more and I can choose what I want to add.
That's awesome. That's awesome, because I think a lot of other situations, in the live in live environments, it might be a little more difficult to do those types of expansions. But that's what I love about Avid, is that with this whole system, the whole thing is based around customizability and versatility. That it doesn't seem like there are an awful lot of no, you can't in this whole ecosystem, which I love. So moving on, we've got the 48. Seems like a similar concept.
It does. So last year we released this, and it was a valued engineered as most inputs and outputs as you can get. And the way we were able to value engineer it, has the same preamps as the rest of stage 64 and stage 32, but what the cost saving part of it is it's not modular, right? So it's fixed IO. So it's 48 by 24 fixed IO. So the idea where you're getting the same preamps, the same stuff, but you can't, as we were just mentioning with the stage 32, you can't bring inputs or outputs or DSO or any of that stuff. You're stuck with 48 by 24. But if that's what you need, and you put that with a system that is maybe a more value engineered, or maybe you just need some more IO, and this is what works. So the idea that fixed IO 48 by 24, it works well for something that you're having high quality with as much cost savings as possible.
This was huge when it came out. I remember when it came out 2 years ago now, maybe, Matt?
I think it was last year or the end of 2021. I can't remember.
Yeah, I just remember everybody wanted one. It was huge.
That's awesome. Well, and I'm assuming that if you want one of these, you're definitely going to want one of these, the Stage 64.
Yeah. So this, yeah. And the Stage 64 has been out. This was what came in the system, when the system came out. And when you're talking to, say you call up Chris and say, hey, I want, a stage 64. This is how it can come, right? So 48 by 8. And so when you're talking about adding more inputs or outputs, if it's, hey, Chris, I want a 64 by 32, he would then add 2 more input cards and add 3 more output cards. Or I've seen systems where it's, I need 64 by 24 with a digital out, right? An AES out to be able to drive my 96 kPa from the stage, right? So then you're this is that modularity that you're talking about when you were like, well, there's not really a no. No, there isn't really a no. It's just how you want to slice the cake, right? And doing the things like the modular input and output cards, that's how you're able to tailor it to what you're looking for. And a lot of touring acts, that's what they're looking for, is this kind of stuff where you can say, well, I know that on my front of house desk, I might not need as many input or many outputs because I'm just driving the PA. But then the monitor guy is like, well, I actually want, I need all 96 outputs, right? So then you start going, well, I will do more stage 32s in this system, be able to get 32, or maybe like we talked about, 3 stage 64s. So the idea of figuring out what IO you want for the tour that you're on really makes sense. It really drives home the idea that it's the unified platform for sure.
And you can even purchase the stage 64 empty as well, correct? Yeah,
yep,
which is
absolutely.
very cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like this whole, especially with this one, is that it's a deeper layer of customization that I think other systems might say that it's like, well, so if you take the Stage 16, for example, it's like that type of solution. It's like, well, you just need to keep stacking those. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. You don't have to keep stacking entire stage boxes. You could get something like the Stage 64 and customize it to your exact needs, all in one chassis, which is great. I think that's amazing. So yeah, I think so. That's basically the entire system of the 3 pieces that you're going to need, specifically the surface or the board, the engine, and then whatever IO you decide to include. I think that we probably want to talk about and we mentioned this a little bit. Who's already using this system, or can you guys think of some names that are utilizing this to great success?
Yeah. I mean, Paul McCartney, Harry Styles, Kenny Chesney, Metallica. It just goes on and on. I mean, I think at this point we're on about 50% of the writers. So the idea of about 50% of the bands that are out there, you can go out front and see something like this.
Right. Go ahead.
I said that's amazing.
Oh yeah, because it is, yeah. And I think, and
Yeah.
I want to hit on what you said, Matthew, about writers. So I think with any band, you know, there are going to be preferences, and there are going to be like these are deal breakers. And from everything that I've seen, you know, doing a lot of research for this podcast, I've seen a lot of people be extremely like persistent about if there isn't an Avid S6L on the writer, it may not work out in a lot of situations. And I think that speaks to the fact that people are comfortable on this platform because the platform works. But we had in our previous conversation, we actually had talked a little bit about some of the older Avid models and why, you know, how people are able to come from one of like the SC48s and be able to bring that into this new platform, because obviously, you know, that's not a platform that Avid supports anymore. Can you talk a little bit about how that could be an easy transition for people that are used to those older Avid platforms?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So what's interesting is that there's so many SC48s and profiles out there. I mean, the idea when the profile or the D show came out in 2008 was that you could take your studio plugins that you're using at home and be able to put those in a live setting, right? And so it was, holy smokes, can't believe this is happening. And in turn, there was a ton of those desks sold. And you know, when I'm talking to customers, I always joke, but everybody has a profile file, right? Everybody has the USB stick with some sort of profile SC48 or D show on it because they were everywhere, right? And so the idea where you're going to take that same file and put it into any of the S6Ls is something that nobody else does. There's file transfers, let me put it on the computer, let me mess around with some stuff, but I'm talking about, I'm taking my old show file, my legacy, you know, venue show file, and I'm putting it into any of the S6Ls, and it's upsampling everything to 96K, and now I'm mixing on an S6L. That is something that nobody else can do. And so if you are a production company, you are a rental house, and you want as much return on investment as possible, the idea that you can not only capture the people that are using the S6L, but also the people that are using the legacy products, that is an encompassing amount of people that you can provide the best solution to.
It's a really cool just answer to that problem too, you know, where you have that, you know, that phase out of older models of consoles. A new console comes out every 2 or 3 years or whatever it may be. Then everybody's got to go, you know, update to the newest platform or whatever it may be. With this, you can kind of just ride the wave, upgrade your hardware, and then keep all the internal things, you know, your files, just keep them going. It's awesome.
Guaranteed. And I think a lot of times people get frustrated when there's lack of support of an older platform. There's no clear path forward whatsoever. And then they at that time, a lot of times people say, maybe I should, and this happens with cameras all the time. It's like, maybe I should jump ship. For, you know, I think for certain people, and especially something as personal as a show file, you know, where it's, you know, all of your settings, all of the ways that you like everything labeled and laid out and stuff like that, you know, that could be for some people the time that they say, maybe I should jump ship, but not so with Avid, because it's like all of that is fully supported. That it seems like Avid is really wanting to take care of those legacy customers that have been with them since, you know, the very first of their you know, digital live console solutions, you know, be able to bring them to the forefront with the S6L. It's awesome. Just as a brief, you know, because we've talked a lot about the ins and outs, but there's one feature that I really want to hit that I think is great for touring, because I think, you know, anybody that's been a live, you know, if you've played in a band or if you've been, you know, behind the desk, it's been an issue at some show at some point that you've been involved in, and that's sound checks. You know, that either the band either can't be there or hasn't shown up for the sound check, or you know, specifically you only have time to do the sound check at a very specific time that the band can't be there, and Avid has a solution for this in the way of virtual sound check. So guys, I would love you know, either of you, let's talk about virtual sound check, because I think this is a really valuable topic in regards to this.
Yeah, I'll definitely let Matt do the heavy lifting on this one, but I could just add, before he even goes into it, that it's insanely unique, and it does, give that opportunity to not even, if you're not around, or if, like you said, the band isn't physically there, to do what you need to do and get the show going. But I know Matt's done it in real time a lot more than I have, so I'm gonna let Matt kind
Love
of
to
go
hear
into
it.
detail.
Yeah. You know, the quick history of virtual soundcheck is Robert Scoble told me this story, and he said that he had Tom Petty, and he had an analog desk and a bunch of old tape machines, and he would take a 2x4, and if this was the analog desk, he would take the 2x4 and flip from the stage inputs to flip back to the line inputs of the tape machines. And so
Wow.
that's the simplicity of virtual soundcheck, is that I want to record everything in, and then I want to play it back. That's what virtual soundcheck is. But what's interesting is that with the S6L especially, I mean, even profiles, and there's a ton of other desks that do virtual soundcheck. But what's interesting with the S6L is that you can literally take one button. You know what? You can edit this out if you want, but since I'm here, it's literally, since it's one button. So I can say I want to go from my stage, or I want to pull it from Pro Tools, and that's it. So literally one button, you can say, I want to get all my inputs from the stage, all those inputs that we were talking about, or I want them to come from my Pro Tools machine. And so the idea where you can say, like you were talking about, Jordan, the idea where the band's not there, and I can't tell you how many times I've walked into an arena or a stadium, and the band is doing a photo shoot, or the band's over here, or the band's doing something else, and I want to listen to the PA, right? And not every venue is going to sound the same, but I can tell you that for the most part, the band is going to sound as close to the same as possible, right? That's the goal. And so you can have the band, the sources coming in, and be able to say, okay, I know that the delay time in this room is this, or I know that the reverb is more or less because of the different walls and different things that are there. So being able to take, as you said, virtual soundcheck, it's one of the best things in the world. I mean, we can even go into and I know we have another podcast for this, but the idea where you can train people too, right? So when you have the desk, the idea of training anybody either on site or at a production company, being able to put your show file and your Pro Tools together, be able to play that show back, you can start as an engineer learning where the transitions are, learning where things are. Even I remember doing my homework the next day saying, okay, I remember this sounding a little bit weird here. Let's solo that up and hear what it sounds like. I remember this sounds like this, and be able to do your own homework, being able to train, and be able to basically listen to anything without the half speed of sound check, right? Any sound check that I've ever been a part of, the band is always kind of like, okay, I'm here. Oh, this is, why do I have to be here?
Yep.
So you get the raw, what it's supposed to feel, the 100% energy of the show without the band being there. So yes, the virtual sound check is one of the best things since sliced bread.
Absolutely. And it also gives you an opportunity too, to, I've had it before where sometimes, and like I said, we will talk about this in the other podcast, but second opinions where I've heard arguments back and forth between, the band leader and the main front of house sound engineer, the day of. And it's like, sometimes it's like, you kind of want to offline some of those conversations where it's like, this is not, necessarily, this is not appropriate right now to be having this type of an argument, because I've seen it in House of Worship many times where it's like, there's, because I think the wireless pack has been a blessing and also a curse in a lot of times. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen the worship leader walk out on stage or walk off the stage and be walking around the church and listening to the mix, and be trying to make changes in the moment. And then, like I said, especially when the front of house engineer is having a disagreement, that's not the time or the place to do that in front of everybody, in front of the band. It's wasting people's time. But this allows you to be able to say that it's like, okay, if we want to make, further changes, if we've got a dress rehearsal or something, it just gives you that option to be able to say, hey, we'll do a virtual sound check. We'll talk about it later. Saves strife on everybody's plate, which is nice. So yeah, I think one last thing, I know it's and one more thing type of situation, but I think snapshots are a really good conversation to have that is unique, to the S6L, and I think that a lot of people are using it in really interesting ways. So Chris, I know that you know a lot about this. I would love to hear your thoughts on snapshots and why they're important, something that people should keep their eye on.
Absolutely. Snapshots are very cool. They're one of the coolest things I think about this whole platform. Snapshots and events as well, which I'll get into. So my background comes from a recording studio background. So I'm used to having, fully customizable experience, setting things up my way, et cetera, which, you can do in modern live mixing as well these days, but Avid takes it to a whole deeper level. So snapshots are literally word for word a snapshot of your surface, your engine, your a snapshot of everything that's going on. So like a freeze frame, essentially, right? And events are going to be customizable, like, quick keys, like, and when I mix, I have custom keys that I could just hit a quick key command and then something happens magically. And I could make that something be whatever I want it to be. And you could do that with the S6L platform, and you could do that with anything. I'm pretty sure you could trigger an event with a fader rise. You could trigger an event by changing your snapshot, or you can backwards. You can have a event that changes anything. I don't know. There's so many possibilities with it, which I think is one of the coolest things that is on the platform, amongst obviously all the other things we talked about. But Matt, is there anything deeper you can go into on that? I don't hit surface level things right now. So
no, it's okay. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I'll add a couple things. So snapshots, one of the coolest things is, say you have key changes and you can scope different plugins, right? So you can say, here is I have an A, I have an A flat, I have a C, and those are the three songs. So you can actually say in A, the only thing that one snapshot does is I'm scoping the plugin for my auto-tune, right? Say you have auto-tune. And then I'm only scoping that one plugin, or those 8 plugins, or whatever. I'm scoping that plugin on key change A. And then you can go back to the other snapshot and say, in that snapshot, this key is A, right? So then you can go back and say, this is the A flat, this is the C, and you go in through and you're just scoping that one plugin, or those certain plugins with the auto-tune, and I'm going back in there. So you're right. Snapshots, there's so many ways to be able to do it, and you can scope just the fader, you can scope plugins. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do on the desk, right? Here, I can't not look at it. It's right here. So the idea where you can scope all of these, right, for all of these. So you're able to scope so many different things into those snapshots. And back to your events, the events page is it's basically binary code. So it's an and or if statement. So I can say, if I do this, this happens. And some of the crazier things are tying the two together, right? So if I say snapshot 1 is my intro, I can say on snapshot 1, when I hit snapshot 1, it actually arms all of my tracks on my Pro Tools. And then 1 second later, it starts recording all my Pro Tools. And then on the last snapshot of my whatever I'm doing, it actually stops the Pro Tools and then disarms all of them. Because I can't tell you how many times I've done a show and I forget to hit record, or I forget to hit stop, and it's half hour later and I've eaten up all the the space on my Pro Tools. But what's interesting is that you can tie these things together. So your idea of snapshots and being able to make a snapshot, like you said, of that song or of that certain event, and then taking the events page and saying, I want to add more events into those snapshots. So as I'm going through my snapshots, I have thousands of other things that could be happening in the background. Right. So I agree with you. What an amazing feature, and it is one of my favorite too.
Yeah, I mean, you can essentially automate a whole show.
If you set it up right, you could do a whole bunch of stuff. That's correct.
I really want to get into the weeds, sure, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I come from a recording background as well, and automation is something that I think every engineer sort of gets down into the weeds with, and it's not something that has always sort of just directly translated over into live historically. But the fact that Avid, they're experts in both recording, obviously with Pro Tools, the industry, probably the industry standard by all counts. And then in addition to the live, through the S6L, it really doesn't matter what background you come from. You're able to to easily utilize the the automation for the people that have already used it and know what's there and need it, to the people that have never used automation before. From everything that you guys are saying, it seems like it's an easy thing to dive into, and you can sort of take it as far as you want to take it, which is cool.
For sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys so much for such a great conversation. I think this was really in depth and allows people to sort of get a full view of the entirety of the Avid S6L Venue platform, and sort of gives the different reasons why you would want to choose this as your main touring platform of choice. I think it's great. So any parting thoughts from both of you regarding this or anything else that we've talked about?
Don't be, I guess I would say, intimidated by moving up to a platform like this. I think there's a space, especially for nowadays. There's a space for almost everybody in this platform, and it just takes like a conversation to understand where you might fit into it, what surface you might fit into, what engine, etc. And it's worth conversation. And I've had conversations with tons of clients who are curious about it, and they just get more and more interested in it, and just kind of turns into like a phone call of us both nerding out, which is always fun. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Keep the door open.
That's awesome.
Just like the song.
Very nice. Awesome. Matt, anything as we leave?
I kind of in that same vein, but it's always a conversation, right? And there is so many tools out there, and they all have their own different ways of doing things. I just know that for what I can do and where I've been, there's so many benefits of using the S6L, and the idea of you don't know until you know. And so, going and having those conversations with, Chris and even myself, right? The idea of saying, hey, does it do this? If you were to do this, can I do this? Right. So in general, as you're looking for a desk, a platform, something to be on when it comes to live sound, I think S6L, checks a lot of the boxes.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you both so much for an amazing conversation. Super informative. I learned a lot with this. I think it's really great. So if you ever have any other questions, or you just want to pull the trigger on one of these platforms right now, Chris, what's the best way that people can reach out to you to be able to pull one of these out for themselves?
Sure. Best way could be either phone or email. Doesn't matter. You can reach out to clm@musicpeopleinc.com. That's CLM as in March. Or you can just call our general line, which you can find on TMP-Pro.com, and you'd get passed along to the next available sales rep, or you can always ask for me.
Awesome. And I would recommend that they do that. Well, thank you so much, everybody, again, for a great conversation. This has been another episode of the TMP, the Music People Crossover Podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.